Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it is Michigan Monday, and I am very excited to say we got exactly what we thought out of the Michigan Wolverines last weekend. The offense looks terrible. Alex Orji is utterly incapable of throwing the ball downfield. And of course, we got exactly the result that was going to be the natural result of that, right? USC won by, 10 points, 14 points, something like that. That's what happened. I didn't watch all the way to the end of the game. I assume that's how it ended, right?
Well, if you missed the first quarter, the first half, then yes, that is how it ended. But no, Michigan wins at 27-24, a come from ahead from behind win for Michigan. Improbable in several ways, but also, as you said, predictable in how Michigan went about it. I think we can safely say that with Alex Orji getting his first start for Michigan, we knew there wouldn't be much throwing or much successful throwing. We thought maybe they could hit something downfield by chance. No, they did not. Alex Orji, 7 of 12 for 32 yards, a long completion of 10 yards. He was sacked twice, but they were saved by the running game, which went for 290 yards on 46 carries. So 46 rushes, 12 passes. There's a lot to talk about with the running game, but if we can start with the passing game, because Tom, for the first time in Alex Orji's career, he did complete a pass beyond the line of scrimmage. It was 1 foot beyond the line of scrimmage. So he has now gone past that barrier. Good for him. It's not a way for them to mount a successful attack in the future. They got a lot of help from Lincoln Riley and USC, and we'll talk about that as well. But the passing game in this one, not a single first down through the air. And so as we're getting ready for the show, I'm desperately going through the internet trying to find the last time Michigan had a game where they didn't have a first down. I got all the way back to 2001. So every game this century until now, they've had at least two first downs throwing the ball. Not a first down in this one, Tom. And it's not just the lack of receivers. And Colston Loveland was out. That's fine. There is no passing game here.
There's absolutely no passing game here. This was a couple weeks ago, we called them the rich man's Iowa. This was passing wise. This was the poor man's Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
Cade McNamara for Iowa threw 60 something yards passing. Former Michigan quarterback, more than doubled Michigan's output. Iowa and Michigan together did not throw for 100 yards on Saturday. This was a tremendous welcome to the Big Ten moment for USC, but it was a welcome to the 1970s Big Ten, I guess, where the pass was. This is a passing offense for Michigan where it's the old Woody Hayes adage, 3 things can happen when you throw the ball and 2 of them are bad. It feels like 3 things can happen when Michigan throws the ball, and all 3 of them are not particularly good. The leading receiver in terms of receptions was Samaj Morgan, who, Tony, we talked about this before the show. I'm going to let everyone at home take a second. 3 receptions, leading receiver on the team. What was his total yardage on the game? Take a second. If you guessed 6, congratulations. You are a sicko. You are also correct. 3 catches, 6 yards, 2 yards per reception. I will do the math for you. 13 yards after catch or 6 yards of receiving. Marlon Klein, the tight end, had the most targets. 4 times he was targeted. 1 was completed. 10 yards after completion, or yards after catch. The total yardage for Michigan, 32 yards, 45 yards after the catch. So they had 13 yards behind the line of scrimmage total on their 7 completed passes. This is the most remarkable thing I think I've ever seen. You looked at this box score, it's like, oh, this is exactly as gross as I thought it was going to be. And yet they somehow won the game. I mean, we'll get to the Michigan defense and perhaps more importantly, the USC offensive line shortly. But this is one where I think Ohio State fans are probably watching that game on Saturday and just going, they can't keep getting away with this, can they? And they absolutely can't. Like there's no way that this is a winning formula for the whole season. But Tony, I also was watching just the opportunism of the Will Johnson pick 6 and
Mhm.
They picked up just a couple big plays here and there, score the winning touchdown in the last second. Tony, is Michigan playing Met Trestle Ball? Is that what this is? Is Michigan playing Trestle Ball?
Well, there's definitely some of that there, because one of my big takeaways I've got here in my notes, basically, let's just not lose this. Let's let USC make the mistakes. We know, like Michigan, this is Sharon Moore thinking, we know what we can do. We know what we can't do. We know if we just do what we can do, USC and Lincoln Riley will do something to give us some type of an advantage, but then we have to take advantage of that advantage. And they did. Now, Michigan got outscored. Their Michigan offense got outscored 21-7 in the second half. So again, that is not a sustainable, a winning formula. But if you can get that Will Johnson pick six, and you can just get through there and deal with these issues, and then if it just comes down to one drive, and as long as Lincoln Riley gives you, I don't know, like an extra minute 20 of clock to work with by not running any of the clock, or just a little bit of it, because in this, we're going to talk about all of the mistakes that USC made in this one. This one to me is, Michigan got the ball back with 4 something on their final drive of 4:02. They got the ball back. USC could have taken easily another minute 20 off that clock. Michigan's pace on their final drive was, let's just take a leisurely stroll. Let's take our time. What happens if they get the ball back with 2:45 instead of 4:02? They can't have that same kind of pace. They need to pick it up. And are they throwing more? Because they were very content. We've got time to run this. And the thing is, like, they didn't really have time to run it until Kalel Mullings busted one. That was what gave them the time. That offense, that drive was dead in the water. I was wondering if it's 2:35 instead of 4:02, is it Davis Warren out there?
That's an interesting question, because very clearly they do not trust Alex Orji to throw the ball downfield, or Alex Orji does not trust himself to throw the ball downfield. Like, there is no downfield passing whatsoever in this offense. So very clearly, one or both of the Michigan coaching staff or Alex Orji himself recognize this is not a viable plan moving forward. So that only works for so long, where the defense eventually figures that out, and the safeties start playing a little closer to the line of scrimmage. Now, when the safeties start playing a little closer to the line of scrimmage, then you can bust one occasionally. And that was really Michigan's offense. They were 2 long touchdown runs in the first quarter, which put them out front, and they allowed them to play out front all game and didn't force them to have to to come from behind. This is like, if Michigan's going to win a game, this is the roadmap for Michigan to win the game. Get out to an early lead, be able to just lean on the run game, get a defensive score, just let the opponent, and this is not like Michigan's defense was a passive observer to the fact that USC was having a crappy offensive first half. Michigan's defense was very good. Michigan's pass rush got home a lot and really made Miller Moss have just a very, very uncomfortable day all day long. But it was still USC. All USC had to do was manage the clock a little bit, recognize the situation, recognize that this team on the other side of the ball cannot throw the ball at all. So if they have to run the ball down the field, it's going to chew up way too much time. All you have to do is take that extra minute 20 off the clock, and you're probably fine. And then you have to not have 2 guys miss tackles on the same play. The Michigan's entire offense in that game was they had the 63-yarder from Kalel Mullings, the 41-yarder from Donovan Edwards, and there was another, 40-something yard Kalel Mullings, something like that?
53.
53. Okay, so 63 and 53 is 116, and 41 is 157. So 157 yards of Michigan's 322. Basically, half of Michigan's total offense came on those 3 run plays, and one of them never should have happened. You had two safeties there who had Kalel Mullings right there and just didn't get him on the ground. And yeah, this is a team that, if Michigan's going to win, this is exactly how they have to win. What I thought was interesting was Sharon Moore. You can tell Sharon Moore knows what they can do and what they can't do, and they have to take some chances. They went in the first quarter, it might have been the first drive of the game, they went forward on 4th and inches from like their own 35, and the broadcasters are going, oh, they're just going to try and draw them off sides. And nope, they went and they picked it up. And then a drive or two later, they went forward on like their own 45-yard line on 4th and 1 and picked it up. Those ended up both being drives where they scored touchdowns. You can't play too conservatively, because if they do, those are 2 touchdowns. You take those 2 touchdowns off the board, and boy, this is a very different game. So Sherrone Moore, I think, has sort of figured out, okay, this is a very, very limited team in some ways. Here's how we have to work around it. And sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not. But it worked out about as perfectly as it could have on Saturday.
Yeah, the 290 yards rushing, 157 of that coming on those 3 carries. All 3 of those carries were parts of touchdown drives. Those are the only 3 offensive touchdown drives for Michigan. And it's because of those 3 plays. 2 of them, of course, were touchdowns themselves. Then the other 43 carries in the game went for 143 yards or 3.3 yards per carry. And so I always chart the runs, the carries from the running backs, Tom, and sometimes I get criticized for it because we're pointing out the short carries and ignoring, or if you just take away the long runs. But the thing is, here's Kalal Mullings. I'm just going to read you the numbers. These are all of his totals on each of his carries, yard totals. 1, -1, 1, 53, 8, 3, 7, 2, 1, 4, 63, 1, 8, 2, 3, 2, 1. Donovan Edwards, who went 74 yards on 14 carries, long of 41. 5, 3, -3, 3, 3, -2, 3, 41, 2, 5, 4, 1, 3, 6. Like, this is not even keeping them ahead of schedule. But when you have Michigan's defense, which played better than they have all year, but counting on a home run is not a winning formula. It's and I had a Michigan fan on Twitter tell me that I'm always taking away these, if you just take away this long run, he's like, the long run always happens. It's always part of the game plan. It's like, well, if it always happens, Michigan wouldn't have won national title in the last 25 years. If it always happens, then why isn't it happening more? Now, there are some long runs that they've had clearly. You can check back to the Michigan-Ohio State 2022 game. But if you're counting on that, you need help from the opponent. They got it this time and against Ohio State. Kamari Ramsey, the safety, one of the safeties that missed the second shooter, the second guy in on the last Mullings run, who just bounced off of him. He was also involved in the other 2 long runs where he just went the wrong way, and there was a huge opening for both Mullings and Edwards to go. And you're watching that, and it's one guy involved in all 3 of those plays. He was a transfer from UCLA, one of the guys that Ohio State was looking at. And Ohio State ends up with Caleb Downs. And that's a play that you would expect, or mistakes that you would expect Caleb Downs not to make. So maybe that's reassuring for Ohio State fans. But when you're just relying on long runs, eventually that luck's going to run out. And, certainly they already lost to Texas. I don't know when, at Illinois, is at Washington, still as much a concern, because opponents are going to watch this and be like, why do we even concern ourselves with the passing game? Tom, I went and jotted it down. So the receivers were targeted, the Michigan wide receivers targeted 5 times for 11 yards. On the season now, 45 targets, 199 yards, 4.4 yards per target. What do you think about them apples?
That, once again, it does not feel like it's going to sustainably be a winning formula for them. And I think they're going to get to a point where they have to have a quarterback who can throw the ball. Is that Davis Warren? Is that Jack Huddle? Is that Jaden Denegal? Is that Jaden Davis? When they get to the Ohio State game, if Alex Orji takes every snap of that game, they're going to lose. Period, full stop, end of story. That's it. They cannot go into the Ohio State game with a quarterback who literally cannot throw the football. You can't be one-dimensional against even a halfway decent team. If they do that against Oregon, they're going to get killed. The idea that they rely on the long runs. Going through last year's game log, Donovan Edwards' 41-yard run. How many of the 15 games last year did Edwards have more than 41 yards total in the game, Tony, last year?
Did he have like two or three others of that length?
4. He had 4 games with more than 41 yards. One was 48, one was 50, one was 52, and then he had 104 in the national championship game. And he did that the year before right at the end of the season, had a huge game against Ohio State, big game against Purdue, big game against TCU, but had a big game against Penn State that year. But most of the games, they're not hitting them. And then it looks real sluggish. And that was when they had a passing game. Mm-hmm. They had a better wide receiver core. They had a better throwing quarterback. It just, I know Colston Loveland's coming back at some point, but you're operating with, when you're playing with a really low scoring offense, every game is going to be fairly close. And your margin for error is very, very slim. I think it was on hang on, let me find it. Yeah, the Donovan Edwards touchdown. Watch the block from Marlon Klein, where he is basically tackling the guy right at the point of attack. If they throw a flag there, that drive is dead. And because if you're behind the sticks, you're not picking up a first down here. So you're operating at the benevolence of the officials missing a very obvious hold at the point of attack, and yada yada. You can always call a hold on every penalty, on every play. Yeah. That was the guy is pulling away backwards from him. Like that's one that was how did you miss it? It was like the Ohio State Marshall play where the Ohio State defensive lineman ripped the Marshall offensive lineman's helmet off. It's like, how did you miss the hands to the face there? Like, how did you think that fell off his head magically? Like, come on. Officials are going to miss calls, but if the official makes the correct call there, then that drive is dead, and Michigan then has 7 points, and then you're really struggling. When you are playing with an offense that's going to maybe get to 20 points against anyone with a pulse this year, your defense has to be just about perfect, and the offense can't make mistakes. We saw Donovan Edwards fumbling the ball deep in his own end towards the end of the game. It was one of those, it was like that Anthony Thomas fumble against Northwestern 20 years ago, where it was like the one thing you can't do is fumble the ball there, and you fumbled the ball there, and you get set up USC for an easy touchdown. You can't make those mistakes. Alex Orji cannot make one bad throw that gets picked off and run back. Michigan has to be +7 in terms of defensive points to win a lot of these games. And that's going to be, that's a tough thing to be able to rely on consistently.
Yeah. So Alex Orji in terms of distance thrown and yards downfield of his passes, he completed 1 of 6 passes beyond the line of scrimmage, and anything beyond 1 yard, it was, he threw on incomplete for 25 yards, 14 yards, 26 yards, 20 yards, 12 yards. Like the ones where you throw downfield, it was like, you knew it was a hope and a prayer for Michigan to complete those, whether the coverage was there or not. Everything else is behind the line of scrimmage and at the line of scrimmage, some bootlegs and things that Michigan has done forever. But there are no levels to those concepts. No, there may be levels to the concept, but the ability to hit those levels is really, really lacking now, and things are just going to get tougher and tougher for them. Do we want to move to the defense now, the Michigan defense?
I'm sure the Michigan fans in the audience would love it if we move to the defense. Okay. So let's do that in the spirit of kindredship and in support of our fellow man.
So how terrible was that USC offensive line? Jeez.
I don't know which one I thought more. If you put me out there in shoulder pads and helmet, which would look more different? Me throwing downfield for the Michigan passing attack, or me playing left tackle for USC? Holy Moses. That was, you got to give Josiah Stewart some credit. He made, he had some nice rushes, but also that was, I have seen tackling dummies on the practice field put up a better pass pro than some of the snaps for USC. That was unbelievable. There was one, I think it was in the first half, where Josiah Stewart got around the guy so fast, Miller Moss had almost not even set up in the pocket and was already getting blindsided. Incredible. Now, you're Lincoln Riley. This is not probably the first time you've recognized that your left tackle is a sieve. So you can do things to help. You could keep a back end chip. You could keep a tight end in. You could do lots of stuff. He chose to do none of the things, and it worked out great as always.
Yeah, I mean, it felt Miller Moss was under constant attack in this one, whether it was with pressure, like extra pressure, or just the inability of the USC offensive line to even get out of their stance as they're watching Josiah Stewart or Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant or Derek Moore run by them. Even TJ Guy, this was like the best I've seen from him, reserve defensive end for Michigan. That USC offensive line, and I think they made some changes then at halftime and put some different guys in there. But like the first play of the game, the right guard completely whiffs. And then I think it's the next play, the left tackle whiffs. Like, this was not a sound offensive line. And, Miller Moss, 28 of 51 for 283 yards, running for his life, throwing for his life, basically, and bailing out and hanging in there as best he could. USC rushes for 96 yards on 21 carries. Most of that, I think, beyond most of that, like 110% of that coming in the second half. But interestingly, if you look at the field position, because Michigan won the field position by a lot in the first half, USC's average starting field position was in the first half was like the 16, and in the second half it was the 36 to the 37. And so, yeah, it's the second half where USC got their 21 points on offense, but the Michigan defense was pretty good in this one. I would that's not a bold statement. The linebackers, we saw more plays from them. I still want to see more from Barham. I thought this was the best we've seen from Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Of course, Josiah Stewart was just supremely fast. I still think this is the best I've seen of Zeke Berry as well, the nickelback. Will Johnson had the pick six. He left the game. I don't, as of the recording of this, haven't really gotten an update on him. Clearly, they can't afford to lose him. I thought the other corners stepped up, but you're putting so much on the defense to come through, and Will Johnson did. And this is his second pick six of the season when they kind of needed it, and that's also a very dangerous game to play.
Exactly. That's one where this is a little like, again, going back to the Trestle Bowl thing. You go back to the 2002 Ohio State-Penn State game, and it's 7-6 in the second half, and Zach Mills throws an interception to Chris Gamble. He runs it back for a touchdown. He kind of zigs and zags, and it's like, boy, I hope he gets in the end zone because I'm not sure the offense can punch it in, even if he gets tackled at the 3. You kind of have the same sensation with the Michigan offense right now. The Will Johnson thing, though, he's had 2 pick sixes. They've both been very important because one was when it looked like Fresno State was maybe driving to make it a real interesting, nerve-wracking thing at the end of the game. And then this one was in the second half when it looked like USC was maybe driving to make it a real interesting, nerve-wracking thing in the second half. Both of them have been very important. Both of them have been him jumping out routes. It's just him jumping kind of short stop routes. That's something that, Tony, we have seen the pump and go work in the past. And there was a safety that was back there, but it looked like he was kind of breaking on the ball too. It feels like an out and up or something like that with a little pump. You're probably going to get beat at some point on that. It is a dangerous game to be playing, and you can't rely on, he already has the most pick sixes in Michigan history. That was something they had on the broadcast. That's not something that happens every game. You can't just rely on, and the defense will score 6 points and probably also force a turnover and set us up with a short field where you can kick a field goal. So you figure you get 10 points out of the defense. That doesn't work. That is not something you're going to be able to rely on week to week. So it's great when it happens, but there's also another side to it where, if he's sitting on Jeremiah Smith, he's sitting on Carnell Tate or something like that, and they run an out and up there, and he tries to jump it. We've seen this going back to Chris Gamble. We saw this with Chris Gamble in the 2003 Ohio State-Wisconsin game. Lee Evans runs an out and up. Chris Gamble tries to jump it. Lee Evans takes off downfield, long touchdown that was that the one that tied it, or was that the one that gave Wisconsin the lead late in that game? It's something it's great when it happens, but it's not something you can really rely on. And right now it feels like Michigan is really relying on it.
Yeah, I mean, they're putting a lot of eggs in just a couple of baskets, both offensively and defensively, and hoping it all works out. Josiah Stewart, we've mentioned him a little bit. 2 sacks, 4 quarterback hurries in this one. Like, Miller Moss is not going to be missing the Michigan Wolverines anytime soon, but he hung in there as best he could and got beaten up for it. I do wonder, and this is just an aside, I wonder how long that Alex Orji can continue to run the way that he does and not get beaten up for it, because you're asking a lot there as well. In terms of the safety help, like you mentioned, the safeties and corners biting or whatever, Makari Page I think he's a better strong safety than a free safety. Like, he's rangy, but he's not very fast. And USC was able to take advantage of that in this one. And he was just a step slow on, I think the first touchdown pass, or one of the touchdown passes. And then you had the crazy bust on the right end zone where they blitzed the nickel, and you had a corner that had 2 receivers to cover. And so that was clearly a miscommunication. I know there's been some criticism of Wink Martindale, defensive coordinator. I don't think he drew it up that way.
No, both of the second half touchdown passes were fairly easy for what they were. I mean, nothing will ever be easier than that last one with the bust that you mentioned. But the other one, they talked about it on the broadcast. Michigan's sitting in a zone. They've got everyone, all the defensive backs are sitting there looking at the quarterback, facing the quarterback, and the receiver just goes and finds an open slot between the 2 guys and didn't have anyone within 3 yards of him. Those 2 throws should not be that easy. So that's something that's going to have to get addressed. We should also, since we're just doing early 2000s Ohio State as compared to the 2024 Michigan, how about the Kenneth Grant fumble recovery turned into a strip from Woody Marks, the old Maurice Claret stripping Sean Taylor in the national championship game in 2002. That was, first of all, it was like Kenneth Grant, like, all right, big man can move a little bit, but my man, you as a defensive tackle, you cannot be getting stripped by a running back. That cannot happen.
Well, and the thing is, I think Marks was coming from the left side and the ball was in the right hand. So it's like, I thought he was going to be okay. I was listening to that call on the radio. That was coming back from the Ohio State game. And I was listening to the USC call, and they correctly, like, hey, remember when Maurice Claret did that in the national championship game? They said it was 2001. I didn't call in to tell the producer it was 2002. But yeah, that's a play that Ohio State fans will remember forever. And this is a play that Michigan fans will only remember for a little while, because they got the win. Doesn't matter. But that really, really changed everything in that game. And USC took advantage of it. But Michigan gets that last drive. And as we said, like, it's just a dangerous game to play. And you're going to rely on mistakes from the other team. And we know coaches always say more games are lost than they're won, but those are also the same coaches losing games. Like, yeah, if you know this, at least Sharon Moore follows the advice. More games are lost than won. He's like, well, you know what? As long as we don't lose this game, we're going to have a chance, because the clock is going to move. We know that it's going to be tight. As long as we're there at the end, I think they showed the culture that they've talked about, the smash thing, just the toughness that they've hung their hat on and believed in over the years. This went to further prove that ideology. At some point, though, Tom, it's not gonna. And I don't know that we need to keep harping on it. But any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Just real quickly, I read something from MLive that it sounds like the Will Johnson thing is not going to be a super serious injury. Does not sound like that's a big concern. On the Michigan radio broadcast that I was listening to in the car on the way home from the Ohio State Marshall game, they talked about the fact that his parents were going up the tunnel, and it was like, oh boy, this doesn't sound good. And it sounds like whatever it was not as serious. The thing about Trestle Ball, as someone who sat through a number of Trestle Ball games, Trestle Ball is great if you have superior talent. And you can just sort of out talent people, and just if you don't make a mistake, the talent will win out more often than not. I don't know that Michigan can out-talent Oregon. I don't know that Michigan can out-talent Ohio State. And you have seen, there are games where you lose even when you probably do have the better talent, just because you're operating with such a fine margin. I still, I would have had the USC game as a loss before last week. I still think you're looking at a 9-3, 8-4 kind of Michigan season here. And I think you might if they fall behind against Oregon or they fall behind against Ohio State, that might go really not well. Cause then, if you have to put in a throwing quarterback, if you don't trust Alex Orji to throw and you have to put in Davis Warren or you have to put in Jack Tuttle or something, then you become predictable in the other way where, okay, then this is probably more of a throwing situation and the wide receiver talent just isn't there. The tight end talent without Colston Loveland there isn't there. It's not great. And one final thing, I know people are wondering, why do they keep playing Donovan Edwards when Khalil Mullings is clearly a better runner on the whole? There was one blitz pickup that Khalil Mullings allegedly attempted and did not go well. He was there was a blitzer coming clean off the left edge, and it was one of the great olays in history. So that may be a not so, maybe don't completely trust him in pass pro kind of situations. Because otherwise, we've said this before, it feels like he is so clearly, in terms of running the ball, the best running back on that team.
Yeah, he is. But Donovan Edwards had blitz pickup issues against Texas. So, it's, it is a tough ask, but still only 17 carries for Mullings. It felt like more, but again, when you get a couple of big chunks, then there are going to be fewer carries. I do think it's interesting. Only one drive in that second half for Michigan did they have first downs. They had 2 first downs in the entire second half. It was that last drive where they got both of those. And it's when they're needing a touchdown, when they're needing a score, they got it. I think they were very, very fortunate that they did. And this is, what is this, process versus results type of thing where, they got the result. The process to get there is not overly easily replicated, especially with what they've got coming up. But yeah, I agree. If they get down early, that's going to bode very, very poorly for them, because getting up 14-0, then you can just put the stranglehold. We don't have to do anything else at this point. We've got enough right now. Let's just see what else happens. And that's a lot of this where Sherman Moore, I think that was part of the game plan. Let's just see what happens. Let's see what USC will do. Let's let Lincoln Riley help us out. And they did. And Michigan moves to 3-1 on the season, 1-0 in the Big Ten. They have Minnesota coming in this week for the Little Brown Jug. There's going to be 2.5 hours tops on this game. There's going to be a lot of running in the ball, and probably something like 20-7 or something like that. Darius Taylor, Minnesota running back, is good, but Michigan's run defense has been fantastic this season. So before we go ahead and hit the thumbs up, we would appreciate that. And of course, check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We would also appreciate that. Become a member. Right now, running a sale first month for $4.99 of your subscription. So check us out there. And of course, continue to find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.